Woo.
So let's start off with demos. Does any group want to go first?
Can't wait to see them.
We can go, I guess.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Share screen. Okay. So our issue, or here, let me go to code and the branches, which might be closed. I don't know.
Are you looking for the issue?
Yeah, right here.
All right.
So just as a quick overview. So basically, we wanted to do two things. We wanted to filter all the items by the user's token so that you don't get everyone's items, just their specific items. And then we wanted to enable the user to enter a pre-existing token that they had from before and join the same list, or share it with someone so they can join the same list. And then if they don't enter the correct token, then it would, say that you did the wrong token, try again, kind of a thing. I'm going to talk about filtering the items by token, and then Julia's going to talk about joining an existing list and that part of it. So just go back to our old branch. Actually, I don't know if I need to do that. But so to filter the tokens or the items by the token, I think Julie and I were having a hard time initially figuring out how to do that. I think a lot of our challenges stemmed with not being as familiar with Firebase. And so kind of like how to navigate that and like which methods to use. So we did have a solution, and Lewis also took some time to help us out. And we ended up kind of doing another solution as well that kind of saved some space. But basically, this line right here is the main thing. So we already had const snapshot loading error equals use collection firestore.collection items. And then we just needed to add this part right here where the token property inside of the item object is equal to the token that we're getting from local storage. So that way we're only getting the items that have that token inside of the object. And then this part right here is also a bit difficult because usually like when you're getting a normal response, like an API, it's like response.data.whatever. And this is doc.data and then .name. And so Lewis also helped us with that. But yeah, so for quick demonstration. I'm just going to go to the production site to share. Maybe this will work. Okay. So these are all the tokens associated, or all the items associated with that token. There's also a clear token button just for testing for ease of use, which we might change later, but instead of going into inspecting the token in local, you just click that and it'll bring you back. So that's that portion of it. And I'm going to pass it off to Julia for the other part.
Okay. Okay, for the form in the home page, 1 second. We created this state for the share token here, share token, and for the error, we have error state. To verify the token, we created this token and link to the form here with submit. When the user submits, it will show, like, it will verify the token. Here we get the Firestore.collection tokens, then we are getting the data and we are comparing the shared token with the document ID. And if they are matching, we are setting in the local storage token with the shared token value. And we are showing the user the list page, list route. And if there's an error, it's showing the error state. Yeah, here it was already here before. Create token. Create token is for this button. This is other one is for the checking the error. If there's an error, it's showing the error part. For the demonstration, which token can I use, Isa?
I think you can use misery space hang HANG space Freya FREYA.
Freya.
Yes.
It's showing, and if we type something else, it says token is not found. Please try again. Yeah, this was archived.
Sweet.
Do you want to add something, Isa?
No, that was good.
Okay.
Well done.
Thanks. And yeah, shout out to who we both put in. We met a few times to figure it out, and we got it to work. So
This is really fantastic. Amazing job on this one. Great teamwork. I want to call out too that token library, we found some like inappropriate words in and we removed a batch of them, but we've since found more. And Juliana was going to put up a PR to remove some of those. I don't know if she has or not yet, but if you do come across any inappropriate ones in your lib, put up a PR to remove them from there. And also, if you can, from the Collab Lab Smart Shopping List template under the Collab Lab organization too, just to make sure that we're not being offensive, because that's not what we want. So thanks for keeping an eye out on that, and amazing job on this.
thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome. Kelsey and Sandy, do you want to go next?
Yeah, Sandy, do you want to share, or I'm happy to share, whatever you prefer?
I can share.
Okay, great.
Okay. You start that up too. Okay, Kelsey, do you want to talk about the issue that we're working on?
Yeah, sure. So our issue, and let me pull up I had our pull request up, but let me pull up the exact to make sure that I don't miss anything. Was to avoid duplicating items in a user's list. So we were trying to show an error message if the user tried to submit a new item that had the exact same name as an existing item, but also show an error message if the user tries to submit an item name that has the same name, but with different capitalization or with punctuation included. And then the last piece was that the original first formatting of the item that the user puts in was what was supposed to be saved in the database.
Julia, do you want to stop sharing your screen so that Kelsey can, or somebody can?
Sorry.
Oh, I thought it was sharing.
No worries, no worries.
I'm not sharing my screen. I thought it was. Oh,
Oh, I
think
just
you
saw
you
it
were,
and then it went
but-
away.
yeah.
oh okay.
Right. There it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
So we were working on the add items file. We created a way where we look into the Firestore and we compare, we did like a loop on the Firestore and we compared the inputted item inside whatever the user is typing and compared it with all the items inside the Firestore. And we formatted it so that the item takes out all the capitalization as well as any, we incorporated a region where it removes any punctuation involved as well. And then we compare the two. We also incorporated a Boolean set to false initially, but if the item does equal exactly to the other item after both of them have been formatted, then we would set that Boolean to true. But if the already have is equal to false still, then we run this line over here, all of this here, which allows the user to be able to add that item inside the Firestore. And this was all initially what we had previously, but we have a new Boolean that helps now so that this only gets added in and you could avoid now the duplicate item. Yeah, Kelsey, do you want to add anything else?
I think there are some like questions that we had during the process that we thought would be good to bring up here. The first thing would be that currently we have it so that like the very first version of the item that the person puts into the database is what persists in the database. And we were wondering if it might actually be more efficient to just format everything that people put into Firestore, because that would also make the querying more efficient. We wouldn't then have to like loop through every single item under the existing current list and compare them. Because if we had like a standardized format, we could just search for the item with that standard format with this specific list token. So that was something we wanted to bring up to the group to see if we would like to keep it this way where the user's format is what persists in the database, or we think we should standardize it. Another thing that we thought about too is that we don't have any checks for like different spacing or if someone enters an item as a singular or plural word. So if someone entered egg and then entered eggs, it would be entered twice. So we just wanted to bring up that caveat as well to see kind of what everyone's thoughts on those things are.
And then as for the demo, so we have eggs here, and let's try like that. I think that is, yeah, and then the alert should pop up saying you have already added this item. So you can enter something else. And that should have added the new, the non-duplicate item.
So in your code, could you explain what the regex is doing on line 29? Is that just like looking for every character, like a letter? Is that what that is?
Yeah, it's looking through the input and checking to see if there's any punctuation. So like exclamation mark, period, and it replaces that with an empty string so that it helps to remove any like special characters that a user might have entered inside.
Oh, neat. It looks simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Sandy. She had this regex formatting ready to go.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
So it's one of the questions you asked is about like saving the formatting in Firestore, I think. And what you can do is you can have like an unformatted name, like how they entered it, and then you can have a second field that's like sort of like a URL slug. You know, like some
Yeah.
articles will have a title and a slug on the bottom. So it's sort of like that. You can have a formatted field and like a search field or something. That's just a string, and you can just compare those the input to that search field instead of the name of the item.
Oh,
That's another way
a
you can
good
do it.
idea.
Okay. That's it.
Nice
Incredible
job,
work on
Olivia.
that one. Regex is so complicated for me, and I know many other engineers. It's one of those things that you avoid at all costs, and then when you actually need to use it, you have to go like learn from scratch again. So if you can like get a good high level idea of what's happening with regex, it's surprisingly something that seems to come up in engineering interviews a lot, despite that you don't use it a whole lot. So having either a really good tool that you can reference about how to do that, or knowing some of the high levels, is something that's like a really solid thing to know. So good work with that.
Nice job.
Sweet. So next, we'll be going over pair programming, which everyone here has already been doing for the past few weeks. So Megan has a presentation to give, and I think we'll also go over your current experience with pair programming with each other.
Yeah, let me share my screen. Make sure I share the right screen. Okay. Cool. So yeah, so like Lewis said, we're going to talk about pair programming, but before we like dive into the content, I wanted to get feedback from you all about like your experiences pairing, and just your sort of like quick high level takes of like what's been working well or what's challenging. You can either like unmute and share it, or if you want to drop it in the chat, that works too. Just to sort of like, you all have been doing this for what, 2 or 3 weeks now. So instead of just like me talking about stuff that you already have done, it would be great to hear from you all.
I can start. So I think it's been going well. It's really nice to actually be able to like be one-on-one with everyone else in the group, because it's a good way to like start to get to know each other, which is really nice. And it also, I find, like helps me learn. Like I may think about something in a different way than like say last week, like Sandy thought about something, or she knew about the regex, which like I didn't know. So it's a great way to help learn. I think the challenge that I have with it is that oftentimes we will get like immersed in doing like one thing and then maybe forget to switch off, so that like we get to flip being driver and navigator. Like last week, for example, Sandy and I worked through the entire issue where I was driving and didn't really realize until the very end, like, oh my gosh, Sandy, you never got to drive. So I think I need to like work on maybe setting a timer or something so that every person gets to have each role more.
Nice. Yeah, that's something that I also have a hard time like remembering to be like, hey, let's trade jobs. Cool. What about other folks?
I can open real quick. It's been a great experience so far. Kind of like Kelsey was saying, it's cool to be able to pull in your shared knowledge, the knowledge that each of you in order to find solutions, and you also learn from the other person, which is cool. I feel like I have been able to navigate like giving equal time, or like having each person have equal time. I think it like helps if before you start, like you kind of read over the issue, and then you can kind of be like, maybe I can drive on this part, and then you can drive on that part or something. I think the challenge that I've had, so I guess a couple of questions that I have, which maybe you can answer later, Megan, are like, what do you do when each person has like a different thought process or like way that they want to approach the problem? And then the other question is, what do you do when you've both been trying to solve a problem with different solutions, but they're not working? Do you take the time to read documentation and keep like running against the wall together because it feels like not as efficient? Or do you kind of split up be like, all right, I need to kind of read the documentation a little bit and think about this, and then come back together and then give shared thoughts on like on possible solutions. So
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, just to like answer it now so I don't forget about it later, I think that in that situation, something that has worked well for me in the past is doing like what you said. So like take a break and stop from like talking about the question, and you both sort of like break out and do independent research to see what stuff you can find, and then set like a time box for it. Like, okay, we're going to spend the next like 10 minutes Googling stuff and reading and maybe watching videos, and then we'll come back and sort of like share what we've learned and like regroup. Sometimes also just taking a for a little and like getting up and going and doing something else is helpful to sort of like clear your mind, and then your brain sort of goes into that, like, you know, like when you're in the shower and you like suddenly have an idea and you're like, oh, that's what I should do. So just like taking a moment to step away can be helpful. Was there another part of your question?
I think that was it. Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
cool. Yeah, no problem. Let's see. What other thing? There's also going to be time to share more thoughts afterwards, but I want to give Sandy and Julia a chance to share anything now, if there's anything that's top of mind.
I love it when just a driver and navigator, like both of them are engaged. Sometimes it feels like one person's doing all the work and the other person's watching. So I love when one person the driver usually asks the navigator for input instead of just driving all by themselves. So that's just
nice. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I feel like so much of pair programming is the communication. It's like so many things, I feel like the human aspect is harder than the technical aspect, where it's like trying to make sure that you're communicating what you're doing and that you're both on the same page and that both people feel like they're contributing is harder than like actually building out the features.
For me
Yeah,
also,
go ahead.
Brainstorming with other person is really helpful, and like talking through the problem together, like talking while writing the code, like I was never speaking while writing the code, is really also helpful. And
nice.
Actually, I read somewhere like driver do the job and navigator should interfere with the code, or they should just watch. I don't know which one is the.
Yeah, we will. That's a perfect segue. We're going to talk about that right now. Cool. So thank you everybody for sharing your experiences. We're going to have some more time later on to dig more into specific questions and stuff like that. So if you have anything, we'll get to that in a minute. You can also ask me, you can like stop and ask me questions as we're going to. Okay, cool. So the first thing that we're going to do is just like talk logistics of like how pair programming works. I heard a lot of you use this language already of like the two different roles that people have while you're pairing. So generally one person is the driver. So they're the ones like touching the keyboard and like verbalizing what they're doing to try and solve the problem. And then you've got the navigator who's sort of keeping an eye on like high level things, or like maybe thinking about different edge cases. And so they're like the ones who are sort of navigating, for lack of a better word, like navigating where to go, like what the driver should be doing. So it's really like a trade-off. Like both people are invested in coming up with a solution for what to be working on and like what different approaches to try. But then the navigator can sort of think about the like high level problem, and then the driver can be the one thinking about like the syntax of like, what key do I type next? And so one thing, well, actually here, let me do the next slide first. So pairing remotely, you all have experience with this now. But generally the process looks something like this. So the two of you hop onto a Zoom, one person, the driver, will share their screen and talk about like what they're typing. And then the navigator provides feedback, asks questions, keeps an eye out on like, oh, you made this typo here, or like you, maybe we need to think about this edge case for later. And And so then you do that for a little while. And then once you get to a good stopping point, or if you just like hit a decent amount of time, you've been like, okay, I've been driving for an hour or whatever, let's trade. You can make a commit, and then the driver will push that commit up to GitHub, and then the navigator basically pulls it down and then shares their screen instead. And so then they become the driver. And then you just keep doing that forever, or until you're done. Have there been any like technical problems that you've found from pairing remotely, or like, has this been going okay?
I don't think so, not for me anyway. I think the most part would be that you have to push up or commit the code and then the other person has to pull it down. But I think besides that, it's been okay on my end.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, I'm seeing head nods. Good. You're all pros at this now. Yeah, I think that one thing that I've done with pairs in the past is like just making like a work in progress commit. So just like at the beginning of your commit, if you're like, okay, we want to trade roles, but the feature is not done yet, you can just put like WIP and then a colon at the start of your commit, and then your like normal commit message, so that it's like, it gives you a chance to switch spots, even though you're not done yet. Okay, cool. So then the last like stuff to talk about is really just some best practices for like state of mind when you're pairing, because it's really, you know, like I said earlier, it's really an exercise in communication more than anything else. And like recognizing that, you know, you're working as a pair so that you can benefit from both people's experience and ideas. And so if you are the person driving, one good thing to keep in mind is that you should be open to other people's perspectives. So like if the navigator says, hey, let's try this, like maybe just go with it. Unless you've got like a really strong reason why you don't think that it's going to work, and then you can talk about that. But generally I find that it's good to just like try it and see, because if it works, then that's great. And like, maybe you learn something. And if it doesn't work, then maybe they learn something. So in either case, it's helpful to just like keep an open mind. And that's this like beginner's mindset of just like being willing to try different things and see what'll happen. And then also just like acknowledging that like when you're pairing, the goal is it's not like directly about teaching or mentoring or learning new things. That's sort of like a byproduct. Like your focus is still on getting the like ticket done. So if there are things that you need to learn on the side, like it can be a good opportunity for like taking some time to explain how a concept works or to like ask questions. It's really just like a trade-off. So keep an eye on like, how long have you spent digging into this concept that's like related to the story, but isn't necessarily helping you finish the ticket, and like balancing that with actually like getting the done. And then one thing that I want to add about that too is like, I think that especially when you're just getting started, it can be tempting to like make the more experienced person be the driver. But I find that as a junior, like when I was first starting, it was actually more helpful for me to be the driver, because then it really forced me to stop and ask questions of the navigator or whoever the more senior person was, to make sure that like, as I'm typing the stuff, I have to like really be able to understand what we're talking about, to be able to like type the keys to make the thing work. But then there's also sometimes where it's easier, where like that's just too overwhelming and you just want to focus on like watching somebody with experience do thing. So yeah, basically all of that to say that like there's a lot of it depends when you're pairing. And so just like keep an eye on how you're feeling and how your pair is feeling, to make sure that like everybody's having an okay experience. And then these last two things are just tips for people in either role. So when you're a driver, make sure to communicate what you're doing and try to get buy-in. So like explain what you're doing to your navigator before you actually just go and do it. And as much as you can, like talk aloud as you're typing stuff out so that you're like verbalizing your thought process, so that it's not just like the two of you sitting silently and your navigator watching you type stuff. And it's actually also probably a good skill for like interviewing, because when you're interviewing and like doing whiteboard tests or whatever, you know, your interviewers are going to see what your thought process is. So it's good to like get into the habit of practicing that, and being able to just sort of like talk while you're typing. And then for navigators, it's important to ask a lot of questions. So that's, instead of saying like, oh, do this thing, you can ask them like, oh, have you thought about how to handle this? Or like, have we tried doing this other thing? Which I think just like shifting the language to be less like bossing around and more of just like collaborating can help that feel a little bit smoother. And let's see, I think the next thing, yeah, so this is like a really short presentation. And I think the most useful part is probably going to be this next piece, where if you have any questions about like, you know, things that you've seen when pairing, or just like want to hear from me and Lewis about our experiences with pairing, or Stacy, yeah, now is the time. Yeah, go for it, Isa.
So this is, I guess I remembered I did have another question. So I guess you're trying to solve a problem and you both have different ideas in mind of how to solve that. Like I feel like in our environment now, it's not really such about like finding the perfect solution, because we're all learning, and this is like, yeah, it's a learning experience for us. But like in a work environment where perfect, it has to be like really good. How do you navigate, I guess, having differing opinions on how to find the best solution?
Yeah, I think that something that I have tried to do in the past is like if I have hesitations about something and I feel like, oh, this is something that might be a problem for whatever reason, it depends on like how strongly I feel about it, right? Like if there's something that I'm like, oh, that I know that that's not going to work because of this, this, and this, then I'll bring that up, and just sort of as a question of like, oh, how would we handle this scenario? And sometimes it's enough because like your pair is also trying to figure out how to solve the problem. So sometimes communicating that like edge case or roadblock or whatever is enough for them to be like, oh, you're right, that's not going to work. And then other times, if I'm like, oh, I have a hunch that this thing might not work, but I'm not totally sure, sometimes I'll just like keep that in the back of my mind and let us proceed down that route, because sometimes it ends up not being an issue. And then, yeah, and then it's like, then I didn't have to worry about it. But yeah, I think with so many of these things, there's never one right way to do anything. So sometimes asking questions of like, what are the impacts? Like, what are the pros and cons of this approach? And talking through that, or like, how is this going to affect our system like down the line if we decide that we want to add other things to this feature? Is one of these going to be easier to maintain than the other one? And I think like talking through like why you disagree on the approach can help you sort of uncover like what each of you is optimizing for. That's sort of like a wishy-washy answer, but
I totally agree with everything you said though, and want to echo it that like there is no one way to do it, but I think for me on my team, it very much depends on the size of the issue and the disagreement and the options that we're talking about. If it's something small that we're working on right now in front of us, a lot of times we'll just have a discussion and really work through it together verbally before putting a lot of code in place or like doing a lot of pseudocode. But if this is a big decision, kind of like Megan was saying, is this going to like really affect like our infrastructure and our app overall and like some really important things, then we'll often like go write down the ideas that we're having and kind of like so like pros and cons of things and what kind of trade-offs we have, so we can really evaluate which one makes more business sense. And a lot of times, some of these bigger issues can be so complex and take a lot of research to kind of solidify that your approach is correct. So it's a lot easier to do those things asynchronously, like go in your separate ways. Stacy's going to document her idea and all of the trade-offs and all of the endpoints we need and stuff. Alejandro's going to do his. And then once we can clearly articulate what we're talking about, we come back together. Because, you know, a lot of times if it's like a really fresh issue you haven't dug into, you're like, I think this, but I can't be sure. Like, let's go get sure first, come back, and then talk about which one is better.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's a really good point too about being able, like, you can loop in the rest of your team. It doesn't have to just be the two of you. Like, if you get to a point where you can't resolve your two individual differences, you can loop in, you know, the rest of your team and be like, hey, these are the two things that the two options that we're weighing and the sort of pros and cons of each. What does the group think?
Exactly. And I like that builds on pair programming so well, because the more minds you have working on the issue, the better. Not only does everybody come with unique experiences, but everybody knows something different about the code base. Even in your situation right now with this app, Isa might know something that Julia doesn't know. And so if Julia never asked her question with Isa present, she might miss out on some really important insight that is only in his brain. So I think the more you can collaborate with your team, the more you can mob program and pair program, the better, and the quicker you get to the solution and the less wheel spinning you do.
I feel like that's just really good advice for life in general.
Oh yeah,
So.
I'm like, my biggest thing like in my daily is don't do work that somebody else already did. Somebody else might already have the answer. So if you're working in the open and being really transparent about your questions, you know, like Megan might come give me the answer that I was going to spend 3 days trying to find. So it's like, be really loud about what you're working on, ask questions and let people help you rather than recreating the work.
I was gonna say too, I don't write my best code when I'm pair programming. So usually I'm just gonna like, I'm gonna write less efficient code, but I usually use pair programming to work with someone to understand a problem and just try to get a result. So when I'm pair programming, I'll just write something that works and then I'll just take notes or make to-dos to follow up on later on. So you can do that as well. You shouldn't expect to finish something in pair programming. Just use it to understand a problem together. So I wouldn't worry about the quality of the code so much.
Makes sense.
I had a pair, my like first dev job there was a teammate that I would pair with, and he would sort of like talk through the problem, and like he would even write the code of like, you'll do something like this and then something like this, until we got to a point where I sort of like understood what we were trying to solve and had like my own mental model of it. And then he would just do like git checkout and just like delete all of the changes and be like, great, now you do it. And that was a really, it felt very scary, but it was a very good learning experience. And I learned a lot of things a lot faster than I would have if I did it alone.
Yeah.
What other questions do folks have? Or sorry, Isa, were you going to add something?
No, I was just gonna say, like, when you have the opportunity to get like hands-on and do that yourself, like you were saying earlier, like it's when you learn the most, I think. So
Yeah, totally. What other questions do folks have?
About the code quality, like Lois said, the code is not like, I wouldn't write such code if I'm pair programming. So like, what can we think about the efficiency of the code? Like, should we think how to do I'm also thinking I wouldn't write like this, But when you pair program, you are typing together. I don't know how to approach to that problem.
Yeah, I think in my experience, at least, the like quality of the code sometimes depends on like how much time you're spending pairing. So I know that like sometimes I'll have like one-off pairing sessions where it's like I'm really just trying to get that big picture idea of what I'm trying to do. And so that can be like a little rougher because, you know, like I'm not going to commit this at this point in time and then like ship that. I'm really just trying to like wrap my head around what I'm doing. But other times, my last job that I worked at, we paired exclusively. So like anytime that we picked up a ticket, we had another pair that we were working with. And so that was it was a much slower process because you do have to be able to like vet each other's ideas and say like, okay, I think that this is going to work. I think that this isn't going to work. But the thing that I really loved about taking your time with that process is that then it totally speeds up the code review side. Like we didn't do it at all. We were like, if we get to a point where both of us feel like this is the right approach, then like we've already reviewed each other's code like in much greater detail than another external person who wasn't like part of our little mind meld would be able to do. So it's definitely a trade-off where it's like you spend more time explaining yourself, but I think that if you're doing pairing exclusively or like, you know, having one pair that you're working on a ticket with from start to finish, I think that can be a good way to improve code quality because there might be some things that you like forget about or the little like concessions that you make of like, okay, I'm just going to hard code this here for now, and then I'll come back and fix it later. And then you forget because we're human beings. Having another person to be like, oh, remember we had that other thing that we did and we need to circle back to can be a good way to actually like improve your code quality.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but Lewis, if you have anything else that you want to add or just like from your experiences.
I was gonna say it's sort of like building Legos, like you pretty much take everything out of the box and then like you kind of put some stuff together and then you clean up afterwards when you're done making what you want it. So you don't have to make it look all nice while you're programming, but once you're done programming, then you can go back and like fix things and clean things up and remove comments that aren't necessary and stuff like that. So it's more like experimental in the beginning, I think, and then you can pare it down later.
Yeah, and every team is different too. Like some teams are really into pairing. Some teams are like, we'll only pair if we have to. Some teams will never pair. But yeah, you can always be one to advocate for more pairing of like, hey, I would love to have somebody working on this problem. Is anybody free to help? And if you've got more senior people on your team, hopefully they should be like, yeah, I'm around and help out. Cool. How are we doing on time? Okay. Sweet. So if there are any other questions. No, okay, looks like we're all right. So then, whoops, I think I dropped the slides in our chat, our Slack channel already. But there are a bunch of links here at the end of just different resources that talk more about pair programming, different tips for like how to do it. So if you are interested, feel free to check them out. Otherwise, we can move on to issues. Actually, I'm doing that.
Great job, Megan. That was awesome.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you for
problem. Okay, let me get out of this. Am I sharing the wrong screen? What are you looking at?
Showing
right now?
Firebase docs.
That's the wrong screen. I knew it was going to happen. Downside of an external monitor. Okay, cool. So now it's, let's see, what week are we in? Project brief. This is week 4?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, it's flying
Almost
by.
halfway done.
I know. Go team. Okay, cool.
Crazy.
So we've got Julia and Sandy. Have we just looped around now? Yeah. So Julia and Sandy and Isa and Kelsey. Remember who your pairs are because I'm going to forget as soon as I switch tabs. Okay. Okay, cool. So the 2 tickets we're working on this week are 7 and 8. So I'll open these up. Okay. So number 7, as a user, I want to see a welcoming prompt to add my first item if my list is empty to help me get oriented to how the app works. So right now, when you add a new list, there's just nothing there. So we want to improve that user experience so that people know what to do once they've made their first list. So there's a wireframe linked here with an example of like what this might look like. Basically, I don't think we have this message right now, but basically just adding something saying like, hey, you're in the right place, but you don't have any items. Let's add something. And then the other ticket is about like timing for your purchases. So as a user, I want to mark an item on my shopping list as purchased so the app can learn how often I buy different items. So there's also a UI picture linked here. So now each of the items that we have listed will have like a little checkbox that you can check to show that you've like purchased the thing. And then there's also this like delete button, which actually, I don't know if that's in scope for this or if that's just
that's a separate. That's a separate.
Okay,
issue.
great. Don't do that. So you can just add the checkbox, and then after 24 hours, that checkbox should like automatically get cleared. We're just assuming that you're not going to want to buy the same thing twice in the same day. But maybe tomorrow you will want it again. So we'll give them the option to check that. And then let's see, I think that this one, Lewis, this one also has to handle like keeping track in Firebase of how often an item is purchased. Is that right?
Yeah, I think usually there's like a field for like last purchase date. Like when you click the checkbox, it'll add that field's value. And then when you load the page, you can sort of see when the last time it was checked. And if it was more than 24 hours, it should be unchecked.
Okay, cool. Questions about those?
So,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, it's real quick. So I guess like number 8 sounds kind of intimidating to me. It almost sounds like we're building an AI that like knows when we're going to buy. I don't know, like, but we're not doing that, right? Like,
I think
No.
like, I think that there's a later issue that is like making it more complicated. Yeah, there's a
Okay.
later ticket about estimating the next purchase date based on the previous one. So this one is not that. This one is just showing you can check things off to say that you purchased them or didn't purchase them. And then having the timestamp that Lewis talked about, where
Okay.
like, you know, the most recent time it was purchased, but you don't have to do any sort of like, I know that this picture has like the different levels. I don't think that you need that yet.
Okay,
No, it's just the checkbox. That's it.
Okay.
cool.
Sweet.
All right.
Okay, now we call dibs. Who wants to work on number 7?
I know which one I want to work on, but I'm not going to say it because I've
Is
said
it-
it the past 2 times.
Okay.
Well, Isa, if
So-
you're the only one with an opinion, then you should say it.
I want to work on number 8.
Okay, let's
Okay.
do it.
Oops, how do I? Okay, cool. Isa.
And
Oops,
me.
no, not me. Force of habit. Okay. Okay. Isa. And who's your pair? I told you, I forget.
Kelsey.
Yeah.
Kelsey. Okay, sweet. And then number 7, we will add Sandy and Julia. Awesome. Go team. Is that it? I think that's it.
Yeah.
and stop sharing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Sweet.
So I'll do office hours this week. So tomorrow I'll send out like another doodle to see when everyone's available, and then I can schedule that. And then, yeah, feel free to contact us, ask questions in Slack if you have any, and we'll be around.
Cool.
Yay. Great job,
Alright.
everybody. You're doing awesome.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
All right. Same.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye.